Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all well, and a very warm welcome to this morning's webinar entitled Cyber Resilience for Business in 2021 and Beyond. My name is Rob Jones. I'm the Group Development Director for the Thomas Carroll Group, and I'll be hosting this morning's online event on a topic that is affecting, or certainly has the potential to affect, businesses of all shapes and sizes from all different sectors. Not just here in the UK, but around the globe. Protecting your business is probably one of the most important things that we need to look at, and the threat of cybercrime and digital risks has become probably more prevalent over the last 12 or 18 months than ever before, and hopefully this webinar will give you a better understanding of those risks and also perhaps the responsibilities of you as business owners and key decision makers within the business of what you need to be aware of. Our panel will cover some of the key areas, some of the most common types of cyber attacks and what you need to look for, the steps you can take to protect you and your business, some of the cyber resilience work that is currently being undertaken here in Wales, examples of some of the cyber claims that we within the insurance industry are currently looking at, and then an overview of the covers that are now available for you. Okay, just a quick intro into our panel. I'm delighted to welcome our very own Thomas Carroll's Cyber Risks Executive, Emma Francis. Emma specialises in data and digital risks and works closely with businesses of all sizes and within all sectors to offer protection in the event of a cyber attack, and Emma advises on the most appropriate and adequate insurance cover available to protect against this increasing threat. And I'm delighted that we can welcome Michael Preston, who's Head of Cyber and Innovation at the Cyber Resilience Centre here in Wales. Mike is a serving Detective Inspector who has now been seconded into this current role, and Mike has a strong background in counter-fraud, major crime and counter-terrorism. Mike educates businesses around the risks posed, of course, by cybercrime, and we'll be giving you his views on how perhaps some simple basic steps can increase your cyber resilience. There will be an opportunity to ask questions throughout the session. Just post your question into the question box and we will do all we can to answer those questions by the end of the session. If we don't, Emma and Mike will be able to email you their response a little bit later on today or tomorrow at the latest. So thanks very much for joining us. We hope you very much find it an informative session, and without any further ado, I'll hand over to Mike to start things off. Mike.
Brilliant. Thank you, Rob, and my thanks to Thomas Carroll for hosting today's webinar. As Rob has said, my name is Mike Preston. I'm a Detective Inspector from Gwent Police, and I'm seconded to the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales. And we are a not-for-profit police-led organisation that is looking to help businesses in Wales boost their cyber resilience and protect themselves against cybercrime. Okay, next slide, please. So I'll kick off then by talking about the cyber landscape. And a bit of bad news, really. Cyber attacks against business are on the increase. A recent poll showed that 43% of businesses who were asked have fallen foul of cybercrime attacks in the past 12 months. And unfortunately, this is an increasing trend. The previous year it was 38%, and we're anticipating, unfortunately, that more businesses are going to be targeted over the coming years too. Perhaps more concern, an item of more concern is that over a quarter of those who've been attacked have experienced at least 5 attacks or more. And the average cost of attack to a business is about £8,000. That's a lot of money for a small business to be losing. And the majority of attacks, unfortunately, weren't technically sophisticated. They could be traced back to a people element. And what I mean by that is a vulnerability of a person within an organisation, whether it be clicking on a link, having a weak password, or perhaps oversharing information on social media, which could be picked up by criminals to target their organisation. But the good news is, where those majority of attacks are taking place, there are simple steps that can be put in place to help reduce those attacks. Next slide, please. Okay, so some recent examples that we've seen in the press of cybercrime in the UK and further afield. Just about a month or so ago, the 5 high schools based on the island of Anglesey were all subject to a ransomware attack. And that's where criminals enter a computer or a network with malicious software, find important information, lock it down, and then issue a demand saying you're not going to get it back unless you pay a certain amount of money. You can only imagine the amount of stress placed on those head teachers, when you're talking about pupils' names, addresses, contact details, etc. About a month or so before, we saw the Irish Health Service fall victim to 2 ransomware attacks. Again, their systems were locked down, hospitals were actually closed, operations cancelled, and large demands placed on the Irish Health Service, asking for large sums in order to be able to operate again. A few years ago now, we had something quite major happen right here in Wales, where a local resident, Daniel Kelly, who was actually a student at the University of Wales Trinity St David's, actually managed to hack into TalkTalk, a communications provider, and cause major disruption there. And you see the bottom headline I've highlighted there, cryptocurrency, once considered to be super secure, still is secure, but even that is vulnerable to cyber criminals. And as you can see, I've highlighted there, many of the attacks we've seen on exchanges involving cryptocurrencies could have been avoided by putting some simple steps in place. Now, you may think, well, that's all well and good. These are large organizations up on the screen here. What about me? I'm just a small business. Why would they come after me? Well, the first point I'd like to make is that criminals and cyber criminals, quite often, they don't target individuals, they target vulnerabilities. They've got codes and they've got systems that are able to scan the internet and websites, finding vulnerabilities, and when they find one, they will exploit it. They don't care if you're a small company, a large one, or a charity. If there's a vulnerability to exploit and the money to be made, they will take it because cybercrime is big business. Also, those organized crime groups that do actually target individual large companies, they know that those large companies have got good cybersecurity in place. So they might actually start looking at supply chain as a way in. If you're a small business that works with a large organization, they may target you to get to them. Targeting, for instance, maybe your email accounts to get into there so that you can send invoices back and forth and they could put some malicious software in it. Okay, next slide, please. So what are the main threats to small businesses when it comes to cybercrime then? Well, I'll talk about some of the things I see on a weekly basis. Absolute number 1 on the list is phishing emails. You've probably all heard about phishing emails, and I imagine probably everyone here has either had a phishing email or knows someone who has at least. I'm talking about those emails that land in your inbox claiming to be from a delivery service or from DVLA or something like that. Inviting you to click on a link or to send them information so that they can sort out whatever the issue is. We're seeing loads of those still now. They used to be pretty basic, spelling errors, easy to spot. They're becoming more and more sophisticated because there's such big money involved in this. The next threat then is ransomware and malware. Click again, please. So as I touched on, ransomware is where a criminal will enter a computer or a network, lock down important information, and then issue you with a ransom to release it. So the word ransomware is a combination of ransom and malicious software. And again, we're seeing more and more of this happening. We've had it happen here in Wales recently. Having spoken to the people who've gone through it, when it hits you, it is absolutely devastating. I'll talk a little bit about how you can protect yourself against that in further slides. Next slide, please. Sorry, the next click, yeah. So, sorry if we go back one, yeah. Data theft then. So, when we talk about cyber criminals, people often think about criminals hacking in, stealing passwords, getting access to your bank accounts and whatnot. But actually, if you're a manufacturer and you've got some important data on there and some IP stuff, it's a growing trend for criminals to be hacking in to try and take that information as well. If you're a manufacturer of an item and you've got some unique products, you could find that your plans are taken and sold on the dark web. Now, the top 3 things are all threats that can be mitigated against. You could put measures in place to minimize the effectiveness of them. But the bottom 2 things you see on the list are actually consequences of when things go wrong. If you fall foul of a cybercrime attack, there are risks to your reputation and your business continuity. I'm seeing examples of where manufacturers are concerned if they fall foul of a ransomware attack, for instance, and a supplier might be concerned if the company is able to pay an invoice, and they may not be willing to release materials, etc. So, you know, people above you in larger organizations are beginning to want to see that you've got some cyber resilience around your business as well, and some business continuity planning too. Next slide, please. Okay, so phishing then. And as you can see on the screen there, the definition of a phishing email is simply a fraudulent or counterfeit email. It's actually an email that's looking to get a response from you, whether that be clicking on a link or replying with some information about yourself, whether it be your date of birth, your address, your phone number, a password, anything really, looking for a missing piece of a puzzle that they're trying to build around you. And as you can see, that the scale of the problem is huge. I mean, the figures I quoted there go back to 2019. Back in 2019, the average person was receiving 121 emails per day. And when I first saw that figure, I thought, surely that can't be right. But if any of you are like me and you go on leave for a week and you come back and open up your work emails, you're overwhelmed, aren't you? You're sitting in there. And if you've got a personal email address as well, it all combines this figure of approximately 121 received each day. Now, out of all those emails that are sent and received, actually 48% of them are either spam, you know, the stuff you don't really want to be getting, or phishing emails. And even though many people have got antivirus and phishing filters, actually over a quarter of them, 30% of phishing emails are actually opened. And there's another startling figure that isn't on the screen there, that 8% are actually responded to. So, and they're becoming increasingly sophisticated. You know, you might remember a few years back, you know, when police started giving some talks about what to look out for in phishing emails, and I'll go on to that in a little while. And they're becoming more and more sophisticated, so the spelling mistakes are starting to drop off. The emails actually look like they're coming from genuine companies, ones you deal with. And actually, we're seeing a rise of what we call spear phishing attacks. So a phishing email is where they just send out thousands of random emails to people, hoping that you know, maybe one or two will click on them. Spear phishing is where they actually do a bit of research into you, where they find out who you bank with, and then when they send you an email, then it purports to be from the person you actually bank with to make it look more believable. Next slide, please. Okay, so those common phishing emails that I told you about, the ones where they send thousands out. As I said, many of us might have received these already, or at least know someone who has. So what are the things you should be looking out for then, and what alarm bells should be going off? So this email you can see on the screen here is purported to be from UPS, a delivery service. Now, we've just been through 18 months of lockdown, and people are working from home, and you know, people are more and more shopping online. And if your household is anything like mine, it seems like every other day there's a knock on the door with someone bringing something from Amazon or from wherever someone's buying the recent clothes from. And so it can catch you off guard sometimes when you get an email. So when you see an email like this, what I'd like you to do is to focus on, first of all, is there an attachment? You click there, please. So you can see there's an attachment there waiting in the email. That should be the first alarm bell ringing in your head. Why is someone sending me a link, and do I need to be clicking on this? Really double check that. The next thing to have a look at is the actual email address. You'll see it's from customer services at UPS. But when you hover over it, actually, see that's just a bit of a cover. The real email address to send that to you is this one here, ntxresearch.com. So if you see an attachment there, just hover over the email address and see if you can find if there's a different email address below it. The next thing to focus on is the time. You see at the top there that this was sent at 4:49 in the morning. Well, you know, there's not many businesses that are operating at that hour, and certainly not many that try to deliver a parcel to you at that time either. And then when we look at the body of the email, we'll see that they sent a dear customer. Now, if this is someone who's dealing with you, they should know your name and they should be addressing you by your name and your title. But bear in mind what I just said, we are seeing more and more sophisticated phishing email traits, where they're doing the spear phishing, where they may know your name. And then towards the bottom of the email there, you'll see the person who's written to you hasn't even had the decency to provide their contact name. They're just given a comma in this instance. So if you get an email like this, it should definitely be ringing alarm bells. But again, remember what I said, they're becoming more increasingly sophisticated. You may see that they got your name on there. And you may see that the email address looks a bit more believable. In those cases, what I recommend is, if, for instance, you've got an email purporting to be from Amazon, don't click on this email or a link. Open up a separate browser window and look on Amazon separately yourself and look inside your customer orders details just to double check that this is genuine and relates to that. Okay, next slide, please. So if you do get one of these suspicious emails, a phishing email, what I please ask everybody to do is to actually forward them on to Action Fraud using this email address here at the bottom, report@phishing.gov.uk. Because what that does is Action Fraud can collect these email addresses, look for common traits in them, and explore opportunities to bring these people to justice and shut these sham email accounts down. Next slide, please. Okay, so how can you protect your business then against cybercrime? Well, the first thing I want to speak about is passwords and multi-factor authentication. You'd be surprised how quick a cybercriminal can break into your or guess your password, and they do this through various methods. One is by researching you. We call it social engineering. They can check you or your company out on Facebook or social media, find out people's names of pets, sports teams, numbers that are relevant to you, and then of course, guessing that most people put an exclamation mark at the end of their passwords as well. So you can protect yourself really by using a strong password. Now we know that there's lots of passwords you need nowadays, and so we recommend using 3 random words, 3 words that have no connection to each other, but you'll be able to remember. And something else I ask people to consider is using a password manager, and that is a process whereby they'll generate a complex password for you and store it in a password manager for you to be able to use later on, linked to your browser usually. So if you're on a particular device, the password manager recognizes this is your device. They ask you for a password to access it, and then they'll load your password automatically for you. And I definitely recommend, I've put it there as 2-factor authentication. There's actually referred to as multi-factor authentication now, particularly where money or funds are involved. And that's simply a process where if somebody tries to send money or is instructed to send money to a new account, something pops up on a separate device, usually a mobile phone, asking you sure this is a genuine transaction. It's a safety net to make sure that the right people are being paid. The second point then, recognise phishing emails. We've spoken briefly about it today, but make sure that you and anyone else you work with is aware that these are on the rise and what to spot out, look out for. The next point, antivirus and patching. A lot of us use computers. I'd like to think everybody here today who's logged on has got some form of antivirus on. But it's really important to make sure you've got your auto updates turned on that, because these antivirus companies, they work all the time to spot new vulnerabilities and viruses, and your antivirus system actually needs to be updated to be able to cope with those. But look after your devices physically. Where are all your machines, where are your devices, who can put their hands on them? But also, be careful about when you're connecting to networks, particularly if you're in coffee shops or hotels and you're looking to use their Wi-Fi. Make sure you're actually logged onto their Wi-Fi and not a criminal's system that they've named very similar to that venue's Wi-Fi system. And the next one then, this is something I'm currently really urging people to consider, is backing up your data. If you're a business and you're keeping people's data on a computer or a network, then you really, really need to have a backup regime. And having a backup is one thing, but being able to use it and access it is another. So if you've got a backup, happy days, brilliant, but make sure you're familiar with how you access that backed up data, and should the worst happen, how can you get hold of it and get up and running again quickly. And the last tip that I'd like to share is I'd like everybody here to consider joining us, the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales. We exist, as I said right at the start of this presentation, to help businesses protect themselves against cybercrime. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if we can get the next slide up. Sorry. So yeah, who are we then? So as I said earlier, we are a not-for-profit centre, and we exist to help SMEs based here in Wales. So I'm a police officer, I'm a detective inspector. I work with a detective superintendent from South Wales Police. And then we've got 14 technical students, 4 business management students, and a network of trusted partners who we can bring in to help with bespoke problems that the businesses are experiencing. We're part of a network of 8 CRCs, so we're the appointed one for Wales, and we've got 7 other CRCs based in England, and we share common problems that we're seeing and resources as well. We're supported by the 4 Welsh Police Forces, so I'm from Gwent Police, my superintendent's from South Wales. We've also covered Dyfed Powys Police and North Wales Police areas. And we're supported by all 8 Welsh universities. As I touched on there, we've recruited 14 technical students from 5 of our Welsh universities and 4 business management students from the Cardiff Met University. And we work with our trusted partners who are all accredited by the IASME certification body, and that is the body that awards certificates to Cyber Essentials organisations. Next slide, please. So what we're really about is our free core membership. We're asking all businesses to sign up to us so that we can share with you the most recent guidance and tips around cyber resilience. If you were to join up with us, you get a welcome pack, which includes the 10 steps of cybersecurity, director's board toolkit, and exercise in a box, which allows you to practice how you'd respond if your company fell foul of ransomware. We also send you a monthly newsletter telling you about all the developments that we're seeing and news and what we're doing with the centre as well. There are 3 tiers of paid membership, which we offer up to larger organisations. And we do have those 14 technical students who can offer a range of services under the guidance of 2 ethical hackers and industry experts. And they cover a broad range of categories that come under 4 headings, really. The open source intelligence, where they can find out what is being said about you or your business online. Vulnerability assessments, which is the technical services, where they're looking to see if there's anything that can be exploited on your network. Policy reviews, where they look at what you've got in place to prevent cybercrime or how you respond to cybercrime happening. And security awareness training, where we can deliver a training program to your staff to make sure everybody is aware of the current threats, how to protect your business against them. Okay, next slide, please. So up on the screen here, then I put some useful addresses and organisations who you may be able to turn to if you want some more help or advice or guidance around cybercrime. The top one is our web address, wcrcentre.co.uk. You go there, you'll find more information about who we are, what we're doing, and how you can join us. The next one is Action Fraud. If you're a victim of cybercrime, or if you've got any concerns or you think something might not be right, drop them an email as well. The report at phishing.gov.uk email address, if you come across a phishing email. The NCSC web address, which is where we get all of our guidance from. That is the National Cyber Security Centre. A website there called nomoreransom.org, which gives some tips if you do fall foul of ransomware. What I would say is I strongly recommend you give us a call or report it to your local police force in the first instance. But No More Ransom does give some guidance and some potential tools that could help you with that. And the bottom one in is Tarian web address, which is our local regional organised crime unit that does have a dedicated cybercrime team. So next slide. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for inviting me along this morning. There again is our web address on the screen, my contact details. We'll answer some questions at the end of the presentation today, but if you've got anything further, if I don't get a chance to get around to you, please drop me an email. Thank you very much, and I'll hand you over to Emma.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Emma Francis. I'm the Cyber Insurance Executive here at Thomas Carroll. So we thought it was important to speak to you about cyber risks today due to the increase that we're seeing at the moment in things like phishing emails, ransomware, which are really affecting businesses. So next slide, please. So we just wanted to give you a bit of an update on what we're seeing and the insurance that's available to protect your business and ultimately your bottom line. So business protection is twofold. So you've got the preventative piece, which Mike has talked to you about this morning, which is really, really important. You want to do everything that you possibly can to prevent a breach from happening. And then you've got the response that's in place. So if the worst does happen, and we know that, whatever measures that businesses do have in place, you've seen large organisations, for example, suffer cyber breaches with, multi-million pounds cyber security budgets, that when the worst does happen, that an insurance policy is in place to mitigate that breach for you. So they'll manage the event and the resulting costs. So business has changed and we now rely on our technology. We're used to insuring our traditional risks, tables, chairs, computers, laptops. However, what we're seeing is an increase in technological claims, so business interruption as a result of a cyber breach, and data breaches, so accidental malicious data breaches as a result of employee error in the main, but also direct hacks. And it's important that that insurance is in place to pick up the costs as a result of that. So cyber insurance ultimately is there to cover accidental and malicious data breaches and the costs involved, and also business interruption. So insurers are seeing an increase in claims at the moment, and this is driven, as Mike touched on, phishing emails are increasing substantially, so insurers are seeing a lot of claims as a result of that. But also ransomware, they're on the increase and they're becoming increasingly severe. So what we're seeing is an increase in the frequency of ransomware claims, but not just the frequency, but also the amount of the ransom. So that is actually driving a bit of an increase in insurer premiums at the moment, and that to me just sort of underlines that that's where the claims are coming in the insurance market at the moment. So we're seeing an increase in premiums for cyber insurance at the moment, and this is driven due to the phishing emails and the increase in complexity of ransomware. So not only are we seeing an increase in ransom demands for your data, what's also being seen is they're becoming more complex to manage. You might get a ransom, but the data's actually, and you get your data back, but it's actually sold on the dark web as well. So that is just increasing the complexity in managing these sorts of risks. So next slide, please, Chrissy. So I'll just run through some of the things that cyber insurance protects you against, so the covers that you have on the policy, and then I'll give you some examples of how this has worked for clients. So cyber insurance is really important, and the best thing about the policy for me is that initial breach response that you actually get on the policy. So you actually call up the insurer if you suspect that you've had a breach. So it could be as simple as someone's clicked on a link, put in their credentials, and it looks malicious. You can engage the insurer and they can give you a coordinated IT response and a legal response, which is really important because the IT response can sort of get into your computer system. We've seen incidences where companies have had a breach, the insurers in the system very quickly, and they've actually prevented that worst case scenario data breach event from happening. So that's really important support. And then you've also got the legal advice that goes along with it. So if you suffer a data breach, you need to report that to the ICO, to breach of personal data, within 72 hours. The insurers will give legal advice and the ongoing legal support that you may need around that breach. Next slide, please. So cyber insurance, so you get the next sort of line of cover that you'd get on the policy is the cyber incident response. So we've mentioned the initial legal response, but then you obviously get the ongoing legal advice, defence cost support that you might need. IT forensic costs are covered on the policy. So the costs of the forensic specialists, the breach response team and all that are covered on the insurance policy. A cover that is often overlooked is the PR response. That is really important and vital for businesses, how you communicate that breach to protect your bottom line. That is so important, and you read so many things in the press of companies that have suffered data breaches. If only the PR piece was done properly, they could have really mitigated the effect of that breach for them. And then credit and ID monitoring. If you suffer a breach and you have to have personal data, credit information, and you need to notify those individuals, the insurer will cover the cost to notify those individuals that you've breached their data, and also monitor the credit and ID, and they'll cover the costs of that. So sometimes if you've been subject to a data breach from one of the large companies, I know they'll write out to you and say, we'll monitor your credit and ID for you for a period of time. And that is something that the insurance policy will cover. The next slide, please. So cyber liability and data protection. So these are the things that are covered on the policy. So liability claims, so you're used to public liability, employers liability. This cyber insurance covers, liability from a data breach. And I'll give an example of that in a second. Investigations, fines and penalties, so data protection fines and PCI fines where insurable by law are covered on the policy, and network security liability, so if you transmit malware onto a third party, that would be covered under that section of the policy as well. Next slide, please, Chrissy. And then the network interruptions, we've mentioned ransomware and the interruption that it can cause to your system. So this is an important cover, and where we're seeing an increasing amount of claims and severity of claims. So this section of cover covers that financial loss, should you have any system downtime. So if you have a ransom and you can't access your systems and data, you've got that lost profit as a result of that. That's what's covered under this section of the policy. Next slide, please. And then cyber extortion. So most companies would say that they don't want to pay a ransom, you're paying a criminal. However, it does happen and ransoms do get paid and they are actually covered on the policy. This is a really important cover, and it's important that if you do want to pay a ransom, that you engage the experts, because you can actually pay if you pay a terrorist or sanctioned country, for example, you could actually be breaking the law. So it's important that you engage specialists and make sure you know where that money is going. So the insurer will pay the ransom if needs be for you, and get any data back where they can't actually get it through their forensic team. Next slide, please. And then cybercrime. So these are some of the extensions that you can actually get on a cyber policy. So if these are the covers that you are looking for, make sure that you ask for the extensions, because they are really important. And the one I mentioned here is theft of funds, that electronic funds transfer fraud. This is really prevalent, and Mike mentioned the phishing emails and things that businesses see, change of bank details, and all those sorts of things would fall into this extension of cover, as it doesn't actually cover your data or your business interruption, but the extension actually covers that theft of funds. So and what you need to do as well is, where you're taking up this cover, just make sure that it covers social engineering as well, as that is where the bulk of these sorts of claims come from, that socially engineered phishing emails that we see. The next slide, please. So what are insurers looking for? So to give you a bit of an idea what insurers are looking for to put the cover in place, I've put a few bullet points here. So Mike has covered off a few of these this morning, so I won't go into too much detail. Employee awareness training is really, really important, as most breaches that insurers see will be as a result of human error. So that employee awareness training piece is really, really important. Multi-factor authentications, that two-factor authentication that Mike mentioned. Since the first lockdown, one insurer commented to me that it would have prevented about 90% of the breaches that insurers see. So that multi-factor authentication, although it doesn't prevent all breaches, it is a great way to protect your business. And then there's the other things that Mike mentioned, so business interruption, making sure you back up, and also having a business continuity plan in place. Antivirus, patch management is really important. And then some underwriting criteria for insurers would be the amount of personal data that you hold, those records, and they will insure businesses that hold a lot more than 100,000 records as well. It's just that they'll want a bit more information around how you look after that data when underwriting your risk. If you've had any previous incidents, which a lot of businesses have, they just want to know that you've put some things in place to stop that incident from happening again. Perhaps that might be employee awareness training and things like that to prevent the breach happening again. And then if you want that cybercrime extension, just making sure that you're verifying payments, so any change of bank details and things like that are verified by telephone if you receive an email with the different bank details on. Next slide, please. So here's just a couple of examples for you. So I'll run through these quite quickly. We've already heard of the large data breaches. So British Airways had a breach back in 2018. They had a personal data breach of 420,000 records. It's a big breach. They had a fine from the ICO of £20 million. That's the biggest fine that the ICO can give out. And they also had a class action brought against them. Mazurk suffered a ransomware, and that is believed to have cost them between $250 and $300 million. So big numbers on that breach there. And then I've got a few examples of the sort of claims that insurers see quite often. So data breach resulting in a reputational harm, so a £705,000 claim. So this was a company that suffered multiple attacks on their website, and data was breached, including payment data. We've discussed the covers that you get on a cyber policy, so the forensic costs and things like that on this particular claim were £230,000 alone. And then on top of that, they suffered a business interruption risk of about £475,000. What happened here is they had a policy in place that actually covered, as well as the business interruption to the business, it covered the reputational harm. So what they saw was a loss of clients, repeat orders that they would have expected, and they could show that to the insurer. And this particular insurer covered their reputational harm loss. So if you want that sort of cover, again, it's something to discuss. And then a phishing email. So this is a really common breach that insurers see. So in this particular instance, the person in the accounts department had an email with a financial statement attached to it. The actual email had spelling errors or grammatical errors in. So again, that employee awareness piece is really important. In this instance, they actually clicked on the attachment and there was a ransomware downloaded into the system. They engaged the insurer and the insurer got them back up and running as quickly as possible. They had a decryption key and they got back up and running. However, with cyber claims, things aren't always that straightforward. And what they then discovered was that delivery information and stock information had been lost. They were delivering things perhaps once or twice, and they didn't know what was in the stock there, so they needed to do reorders and things. There was missing stock, so they had a claim there of £42,000. And I won't go through a lot of cybercrime examples, which is that funds transfer frauds, because it is prevalent, and things to just look out for: phishing emails, and Mike went through all that this morning. And again, if you're logging onto public Wi-Fi, just make sure that you're logging onto something secure or not using it at all, really, just to protect your business. Okay, next slide, please. So that's it from us. I've got a few questions come in, so I'll just go through those. I don't think we'll get through them all now, just conscious of time, and you're all really busy. So anything that we don't pick up, I'll pick up. We'll pick up with you after the event by email. So Mike, does ransomware attack Mac computers?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, it does actually. So Mac computers are considered to be more secure than the Windows computers. I'm not sure where that comes from, but I would imagine it's because the majority of computer systems used out there are Windows based. I think I read somewhere the other day there's about 7.5% of the market share is with Apple. So the vast majority of systems being used around Windows, and so because Windows machines are being used more, where we get more reports of ransomware affecting those. But ransomware and malware does affect Mac machines just the same way. In fact, I was reading something the other day, ransomware affecting Mac computers is actually called Mac ransomware. And it's devised in such a way that when they lock down and encrypt your data, it actually changes it. So it's less likely you'll be able to get your data back, even if you pay the ransomware demand, if you're using a Mac machine. So that's why it's really important that you don't become complacent just because you've got a Mac. Keep those principles in mind that we spoke about today, and please make sure you've got a backup.
Okay. And if I do backup to a cloud, do I need another backup option as well?
Okay, yeah, another good question. So a lot of people are using Microsoft 365, Teams, etc. A lot of people are backing into the cloud now. First of all, brilliant that you've got a backup, whether it be on the cloud or not. That's fantastic. What I'd say is make sure that you know how to access that and practice being able to access your backup as well. And really think about how often do you back up. If you're backing up once a week, can you afford to lose a week's worth of work or data? Really look at your backup regime. And if you've got someone else handling that for you, speak to your service provider and ask them those questions so you're comfortable. You can get that information should you need to. With regards to if you're just backing up to the cloud, like I say, that's good, you've got one backup. But what we say is it's always good to have more than one. So if one fails, you've got something else to turn to. Now, some businesses I speak to actually have hard drives they back up to. That's a great alternative or a great second option. If you're going to do that, there's some things you have to consider. One is, again, make sure you've got a good regime, that you're backing up every day, twice a day. Once you've done your backup, make sure you disconnect that device, because if you leave it connected, it's just as vulnerable as your network or the computer you're working on. And if you've got an external device, make sure you keep it somewhere secure, because of course that's going to have private data on there. So you need to make sure you know who's got their hands on that device. And also bear in mind these external devices, they've got a shelf life. And the hard drive has got small needles and parts inside, and they do perish over time. So just keep a note of when you bought it, when you started using it, and make sure you've got a plan to replenish it as you go along as well.
Okay, and a question on insurance. So if I don't have all the cyber security in place, can you still get some insurance cover? So prevention piece is really important, and we recommend that you do everything that you possibly can to prevent a breach. the more security that you have in place, the more options that you'll have available from different insurers, as they all have different underwriting criteria. So that means you'll have access to, you know, different premiums, insurers with different underwriting criteria. What I would say is that a lot of insurers are sort of changing their underwriting criteria at the moment, as they are seeing an increase in claims. So traditionally, where they might have asked less questions, they're starting to ask a little bit more. One of the things being that they're looking for at the moment is multi-factor authentication for a lot of mid-sized and corporate businesses, and that would have prevented a lot of claims that they paid out this year. There's actually excellent risk management if you implement it anyway, and by doing that you have access to more insurers where perhaps maybe only one or two are not requiring that at the moment. So so the answer is yes, you can get covered, depends on what we've got in place, but the more protections that you've got in place, it'll give you a bit of access to more insurers really, and different premium levels. So I think that should wrap it up for now. Any questions that we haven't got round to, because I know we're all busy, we'll send you an email after the event or tomorrow and just get back to you on those. Is there anything you want to add there, Mike? Or so thank you very much for Mike for giving the presentation. It's really important that we do everything we can to sort of manage our cyber risks, and thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you.